You walk into a store to grab one tube of toothpaste. 20 minutes later, you arrive at the checkout register holding snacks, a new water bottle, and a promotional shampoo pack. The digital world operates on the same frequency. You open an app to check a single video and eventually realize 2 hours have passed while you were scrolling through content you never planned to watch. These outcomes are the result of how human biology interacts with modern surroundings. Our brains evolved in environments where resources like food and shelter were genuinely scarce, making us hyper-attuned to opportunities. Today, marketers and developers use that evolution against us. They design stores and apps to function as an architecture of persuasion, using subtle cues to guide choices without alerting our conscious mind. Because the world is engineered to bypass our logical thinking, regaining financial control requires mapping out the specific mechanics used to hijack our decisions. This diagram illustrates anchoring. When you see a high original price crossed out for a discount, your brain fixates on that first number to judge everything that follows. The perceived value bar climbs because the anchor makes the lower price feel like a bargain, regardless of what the item is actually worth. Companies also use a third, deliberately unattractive option called a decoy. Notice how the middle tier pulses as the more expensive option C appears. Option C exists only to make option B look like the most rational choice. We compare the options against each other rather than evaluating if we need the service at all. Once prices are framed, advertising shifts towards emotional associations. This strategy aims to move the decision-making process away from a product's technical features and towards the buyer's sense of self. Luxury brands sell status, success, and belonging, rather than watches or cars. When a product is tied to an identity, the brain's critical analysis of its utility often slows down. When anchored numbers and emotional identities dictate our choices, we spend money based on how a purchase makes us feel in the moment. Evaluating every financial decision with cold logic is mentally exhausting. To save energy, the brain looks for social cues to determine if a choice is safe. We see a long line at a restaurant or a viral investment trend and assume the crowd possesses information we don't. This social proof convinces us to follow the pack, simply to avoid being the only one left out. We also look for authority figures. Cues of power, like an expensive suit or a media appearance, can cause us to accept financial advice at face value without verifying the underlying data. Even a small, free gift triggers a sense of reciprocity. This creates a psychological elevation to return the favor, often leading to a purchase we didn't originally want. By activating these deep-seated tribal instincts, companies can bypass our skepticism. We end up trusting the crowd or the expert rather than doing our own research. The best way to prevent logical thinking is removing the time to do it. When forced to move fast, we move emotionally. This chart shows how scarcity alerts and countdown timers affect us. Because our ancestors survived by securing limited resources, a rapidly declining supply line triggers a spike in anxiety. Our brains treat a limited time offer with the same urgency as a dwindling food supply. FOMO acts as a social version of this scarcity. When we see others profiting from a trend, the fear of being left behind can push us into high-risk investments during the peak of a cycle. If that fast decision turns out to be a mistake, the sunk cost fallacy often takes over. Our brains struggle to accept a loss, leading us to throw more money into a failing investment just to justify what we've already spent. Finally, companies use default choices to exploit our natural preference for the path of least resistance. Auto-renewing subscriptions and pre-selected add-ons ensure we keep spending, simply because it's easier than opting out. These tactics rely on momentum. They are designed to ensure the money leaves your account before your logical mind has a chance to intervene. Every tactic we have discussed shares a common mechanism. They compress the space between a trigger and your response to force an automatic reaction. Most financial mistakes are a result of this pacing. When we react instantly to urgency or social pressure, we're operating on the autopilot programmed by marketers. This diagram shows the direct path from a stimulus to a reaction. To protect your wealth, you have to break that connection. Successful decision-makers build a deliberate buffer zone, a pause that allows the logical prefrontal cortex to catch up with the emotional brain. Use that pause to ask, why do I want this? Who benefits if I buy this right now? And would I still want this if no one else could see it? You can also use the power of defaults to your advantage. By automating your savings and investments, you make building wealth the path of least resistance. Financial power comes from awareness. Once you recognize the mechanics of the game, tactics lose their influence, and you regain control over your financial future.